I got it.
There we go.
Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. The time is 3:03, where it's October 19th. This is the special meeting of the Woodland-Davis Clean Water Agency Board. We'll start by doing roll.
Chairman Josh Chapman,
Here.
Vice Chair Tom Stallard,
Here.
Director Will Arnold,
I'm here.
Director Rich Landsberg,
Present.
participating agency rep from UC Davis, Camille Kirk,
Here.
and Director Angel Barajas. Not present.
There's no photographer. Inside joke, don't worry about it.
Oh,
Brutal.
Ooh. All right, thank you. So we have a quorum. Remind me again, do we need to do the teleconference reauthorization voting?
we do.
Okay, all right. We get a motion to approve the teleconference meeting reauthorization.
Stallard
So-
moves.
Second, Arnold.
All right, moved by Stallard, second by Arnold. Can we get a roll?
Chair Josh Chapman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard,
Aye.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Landsberg.
Aye.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Passes unanimously. We'll move next to the approval of today's agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, thank you. Moved by Arnold, second by Stallard, or by Landsberg.
Right.
You can do roll call.
Yes.
Thank you.
Chair Chapman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard,
Aye.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Landsberg.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. We're going to move to item number 3, general public comment. So for items related to anything that's not on today's agenda, if there are participants here, you can hit the raise hand button, or are we still doing the *9 for call in, or is there a call in?
There is the option for call
Okay.
in or email. We did not receive any public comment at the agency.
Perfect. And I'm not seeing any here on this Zoom right now, so we will close public comment. Move to item 4, approval of the consent calendar.
Stallard moves the consent calendar.
Second, Arnold.
All right, thank you guys. Moved by Stallard, second by Arnold. We'll get a roll call, please.
Chair Chapman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard,
Aye.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Landsberg.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, Stallard here.
Yes.
I'd like to request that we incorporate the approval of the agenda with the consent calendar going forward. It'll save us one less roll call vote. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I can do that.
All right, we're going to move on to item number 5, fiscal year 2022-2023 budget update.
Yeah, this is mainly an informational item for what will be in the January board meeting. When we approved the agency's budget back last June, we included roughly $200,000 for water purchases and another $100,000 for water rights support. You may recall that the agency has also entered into agreements, water transfer agreements with both Conway Preservation Group and the Southside Water District to allow us to keep an operation this summer. And those two agreements result in a payment to Conway Preservation Group of around $707,000 for the 1,300 acre feet we purchased from them. The agreement with Sutter for 6,000 acre feet is for $4.3 million. So roughly it's $5 million of water purchase spending we did this year that's not quite encapsulated in our budget. It's not necessarily a problem for the agency, but we need to formally amend our budget to account for that spending. So we'll need to do that as a formal action at the January board meeting. One of the other factors related to this is we're actually using reserve money to pay for the water this year. We've been having some discussions of what do we do going forward, because it could be that we stay in drought again this winter, may need to do some water purchasing again next year. If not next year, sometime in the not too distant future, we will be in this situation again. So the partners are all working to look at how do we and how should we refund this money essentially. City of Davis is already contributing $2 million back to the agency for future water purchases, and City of Woodland and UC Davis are considering what they should do. So that may be also on a future agenda item. Basically, the way we've been operating is each partner can decide separately to what extent they want to purchase water. The agency doesn't tell partners or really tell partners what to do. It's really up to the partners to what extent they want to buy water. And then the agency goes ahead and does that for them. One way that we're possibly going to cover some of that cost is that as we do each year, when we complete the fiscal year, so we just completed fiscal year 21-22, after we complete paying off everything from that fiscal year, typically we have some unspent money in the budget left over that typically is credited back to the partners on the either Q2 or Q3 payment, depending on when we get the books for the previous year done. One thing that could help pay for some of this is to just use that money instead of refunding it back to the partners or reducing the next quarterly payment, just using that to basically put money back into the reserves to help pay for future water purchases. So that's one option that we have. There are a few other things that we'll be talking about a bit later that may impact the original budget, things that were not foreseen back in June, but now are very much a reality for us. So we'll talk more about that. So there may be a need really for the first time in our agency's history of budget revision in a January mid-year budget. So it's really just kind of a quick heads up that there are some things that we're going to need to do in January board meeting. Any questions? I know I went through that kind of quickly. Any questions on that?
The only thought I would share, Tim, is, it'd be nice probably to have a slide with some of these numbers on it when you're talking about them. I'm more visual than oral, to be honest, and I'd like to kind of look at them when I'm hearing about them.
Yes, okay. Yeah, for some of the more unforeseen costs, we do have slides for those coming up.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the quick budget update?
All right. Thank you, Tim. We'll see you none. We'll move to item 6, Journal Manor Operations Update, Davis Woodland Water Supply Project. Back to you, Tim.
Yep, yeah, I'll do our usual update. The usual topics, water supply outlook, supplemental water supply update, where we are with a couple of capital improvements, and operations update, and then our new topic, transformer failure. That's yeah. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Can I do that? Okay, so the first thing, this time of year, typically we talk about where are we with respect to Term 91. That, as I think you all know, is when Term 91 is in effect, we do not have access to our primary water right. And we run out of the ability to use our CVP water right and the purchased water by October 31. So if Term 91 is still in effect after October 31, we do not have access to either of our 2 water rights. The graphic I'm showing you is from the State Water Board. It is updated every Friday. So it's current as of last Friday. The area where it's red shows when it's in the red territory, that means Term 91 is in effect, or should be. And when it's in blue, it means it does not need to be in effect. The green vertical line is October 26th last year. That's when the curtailment ended last year. The red vertical line is June 3 of this year, and that's when the curtailment started. The lighter blue dashed line has another bunch of squiggly lines on it, I guess, is last year's daily flows. The darker blue line is where we are this year. So the water year starts October 1. So that's kind of why we just have a little bit in the dark blue right now. But we do have the daily graph that feeds into this weekly update. And every day this week, it's still true as of last Friday, that the water supply is still trending between 3,000 and 4,000 cubic feet per second in the territory where Term 91 will continue. So the thinking is that this year, because the reservoirs, we're going to get to the reservoirs next, but Term 91 will likely stay in effect until we get some real rain that allows for natural inflow to basically make it go into the blue territory and stop. In past years, the term 91 curtailment would end basically the end of irrigation season when farming ended for the year. But I think this year that's not going to be the case. They're going to keep it. They're going to keep it in effect until we get real rain. I'm sure some of you have seen the long range forecasts that are coming out now for November, December, January, and it's looking to be another dry winter for us, unfortunately. Not to say that it will be, but that's what NOAA's telling us, anyways. Next slide. This is a look at Lake Shasta storage levels. This is as of yesterday. So Lake Shasta, you're used to seeing this graph. The top of the shaded area is the average every day, and then the blue and green on top are wet years. The red line is the 1976-77 drought. The darker blue is where it is as of Monday. Very low. It's about 32% of capacity at the moment. It's basically been there most of the year because they did cut everybody's water rights substantially to keep water in Shasta. They had a target of trying to keep at least 1.25 million by October 1, and that's just in case we get a dry winter that they need to keep at least something in Shasta. So that's where Shasta's at right now. Next slide, please. This is a look at Lake Oroville. The same thing applies. Lake Oroville is also right around 32-33% of its capacity at the moment. Quite a bit below average for the year. It's below the drought of record. So I think the combination of continued dry weather, how low these reservoirs are, that I think that term 91 will continue for some time. That's not to say we could get a large storm like we got last October and not get out. That's not currently in the forecast. But I think it will take a real storm event to basically end the curtailment for us this winter. I could be wrong. There's not a real science to this. Everybody kind of makes a guess, but I think that's where it might be this year. Any questions on water supply before we move on? So this is a bit of a look backwards. Our CVP water rate was cut to 18%. So instead of our usual 10,000 acre feet, our contract says it can be cut to 7,500 during a Shasta critical year. However, this year, Bureau of Reclamation cut us down to 1,800. And that was mainly because Lake Shasta only had about 1.5 million acre feet water stored in it at the beginning of the irrigation season. So they did not have enough to provide irrigation water or water to suppliers like us. So everybody got a really severe cutback. We did purchase water from South Sutter Water District. We completed using the 6,000 acre feet on September 9. September 9, we switched to using a combination of the water that we purchased from Conaway Preservation Group, 1,300 acre feet, and our own CVP water right. The little storm we got a couple of weeks ago, on account of that, reclamation actually relaxed the 18% for about 2 weeks. So I don't really know how they're going to account for it. And I kind of said that in my update the other day. But what we did is we told the partners that as soon as we got that notice, basically you can use as much water as we want through end of October. The math should work out. It just kind of, they relaxed 18%, keeps the curtailment in effect, but we could use a bit more of the 1,800 or a bit more than the 1,800 acre feet we were allotted.
Was Woodland able to inject water during those 2 weeks?
No, no, we only have, the agency only has the ability for Woodland to inject water when we're using our primary water right.
Thank you.
For our state water board water rate, not the CVP water rate. Woodland, so one bit of good news is, I guess 2 bits of good news. Last winter, even though we're in, the third year of I guess the worst series of drought, I think in over 1,000 years, Woodland was able to store 835 million gallons of water in its ASR wells. To date, we've used about half of it. So about half of that is still remaining. I think we'll use some in November, December, hopefully not too much. But the rest of that will roll over until next year. So that'll help a bit with overall supply next year. Another bit of good news, Congress allocated $60 million to the Sac River Settlement Contractor Group for the 2.1 million acre feet that group holds in Lake Shasta. our 10,000 acre feet, our CVP water rate is in the SRSC group. $60 million sounds like a lot of money until you divide it by 2.1 million acre feet. What that means to us is that we will be getting a check for around $270,000. Basically, it's Reclamation's attempt to kind of make up for cutting a water rate down to 18% this year. So it's something, but some money's good, I guess. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. Looking ahead to supplemental water supply, we have an item today to talk about short-term water supply and also long-term options to some extent. Still looking at longer-term options. I think that this November, December issue is basically going to be pretty much a permanent thing for us. And then also some options for summer supply. Had some meetings recently with Sites Reservoir. That's still an option. That's looking a lot less likely. Even from their perspective, it's looking a lot less likely. There's not a whole lot of water freely available in the reservoir for purchase anymore. And it really depends on how much Reclamation wants to take. They have priority. So it could be that there's, I think last time we looked at it, the amount of people looking for water was about 10 times the amount of water available, something like that. So it's probably not, it's not the most likely option for us. Working with South Sutter, however, they are interested in a long-term arrangement. And in the contract up for consideration today, there's a clause in there that says we will meet with them by the end of this year to work towards a longer-term agreement. We could not do a longer-term agreement with them for this year, mainly because it requires a much more detailed environmental document. And the other big factor is, how do you handle pricing? We don't want to get tied into an agreement with a set price every year or the same price every year, because every water year is different and the value of water changes year to year. And that's the same concern they also have, is how do we work into a contract variable pricing to kind of reflect what the actual conditions are. One other thing on our end, is we have done agreement with the city of West Sacramento a number of times at a much lower rate. That water is not available this year. It was not available last year. So there may be something we can work on with them going forward, but then what happens in a year like this year when Reclamation says it's just not an option? So things to consider. So we're still working on that. We're looking to solve kind of our long-term November, December issue. Next slide, please. Talk about some capital improvements. Not a whole lot of changes on this. We are working on a number of different things, primarily at the intake, looking to get for safe roof access. When that facility was constructed, it didn't have really the ability to climb a ladder to get to the roof and actually safely get on the roof. We still need to realign the screen cleaner. We're getting closer to getting quotes to that. Basically, the pulley is not in alignment and is creating too much wear on the cable, which would basically shorten the lifespan of the cable. And then the other option is our other item is working on the hoist to allow for the screen cleaner to clean the bearings. We don't really have a good way to get over the edge to repair and maintain the screen cleaner bearings itself. And then we're also working with RD 2035 and cost sharing. They are responsible for 80% of the cost, and we're responsible for 20. We need to get that cost sharing agreement, and well, I guess the agreement's already in place, but we just need to get agreement to actually pay for the work before moving forward with it. The other thing we're working on right now is our raw water flow meter failed. That's getting replaced this fall. It was already quite a while ago, but supply chain issues, I think we're getting it later on this month or next month. That will finally get replaced. That may have had a shorter life than expected because of the raw water that we're running through it. We're running through a lot of sand and silt through that meter, which maybe shorten the life on that one. So that should get replaced soon. The erosion control project did not happen this year. We'll work on doing that next year. That's the fix some erosion on the south side of the intake itself. Any questions on capital projects? Okay, next slide, please. I believe we're up to Stan talking about operations.
All right, cool. So this is a first slide, very familiar for you. I mean, just giving you the average flows we've seen. As Tim mentioned, with the relaxation from reclamation on the flow amounts for the 2 weeks, and the delay originally from term 91 starting earlier this year. Those flows you see there are a bit higher than you would expect, given the water year we're in, but we basically have been using what we need to supply all of the partners with a little bit of groundwater augmentation. The plant continues to perform well regulatory wise. And as Tim mentioned, we're using our supplemental water rights. And as he also mentioned, they cannot inject ASR, Woodland cannot inject ASR when term 91 is in effect. Just some more fun with costs coming up. Tim mentioned some budgetary items related to water purchases that we'll be chatting with you about. There is also some adjustments potentially that we'll be needing to bring forward related to chemical costs. As you can see on the screen, for projections of our 22-23 originally, we were projecting around 435K in chemical costs for the year. This just now, used to be we could do chemical costs annually and have a fixed price. Given supply chain issues, given some other challenges within the markets and inflation for materials and supplies, they can no longer confirm quarterly or annually. So we basically have a price per quarter now. And as you can see, for the first quarter, the prices per gallon for all three of our main chemicals has gone up significantly. Basically almost close to double where we were and what we anticipated. So we probably will look for an adjustment on that come January as well. As you know, we've been using aluminum sulfate for our coagulant. We've been doing that for a while. We did it on a temporary basis originally with our permitting agency. We did ask for permanent use. And we can then, at that point, whichever we need to use, ferric chloride or aluminum sulfate, we can use either depending on what the needs of the plant are and then chemical costs. So we've sought their approval, Division of Drinking Water's approval for permanent use of that chemical. And then I think I mentioned in the past, Jacobs has a desire to have remote monitoring capability at the plant, which means they wouldn't necessarily have staff on hand in the night times. They'd be doing it remotely. That does require DDW approval. So we do plan on seeking that approval once the alum question with the permit is satisfied. And then just a couple of notes. Like many agencies, Jacobs themselves have had some difficulties in hiring and staffing. They were able to secure another operator and another mechanic for the facility, which definitely will enable them to operate it safely and securely moving forward. It is a challenge, no doubt, and we continue to have discussions each month with Jacobs on the staffing and the challenges that are presented with that. And then the new item. So on the end of September, we did have another transformer failure. You may recall, those of you that were involved at that time, I want to say it was about 2 years ago now, we did have a transformer that basically failed. It shorted out and the transformer itself was destroyed to a significant extent. And here at the end of September, we had another one basically fail in the same fashion. The wires leading into it on one supply on the downstream side shorted out and created a critical failure with the transformer. The transformer itself is no longer usable. The wires themselves have been replaced and such, but the transformer is not usable, and it could be up to a year before we are able to secure another transformer on site. So it is a challenge. We're operating safely. Nothing occurred from a plant perspective. We are in fact, we had a meeting earlier today with Jacobs and San Joaquin Electric, who is their sub electrical contractor. We are doing multiple investigations as to the causes, and we're going beyond, the last time when the transformer failed, the first one, we did preliminary investigations focused on that area. This time, we're intending to do full-scale investigations of all of the electrical wiring, and assessing whether or not we have any other conditions that might be present to potentially impact future other transformers that are on site. So we'll be able to report back on some of those findings probably in January as well. And that is, and there's just a picture of some of the wiring that was basically that wiring, the sheathing either was rubbed off in its conduit or had a pinhole. And basically what you're seeing there is a catastrophic failure from the electrical current that was running through those wires, basically burnt up, and that surge destroyed the transformer as well. And with that bundle of joy, that's about all I have today. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. What do you have a sense what the timeline is for the approval of the alum piece?
It really, Tim, I don't know, you've been closer on that with the submittal.
Yeah, they had a few questions earlier regarding did we have secret approval for using this chemical, which we did. They haven't asked me any questions for about 3 weeks now, so I'm expecting that we'll get it probably any day now. I can typically what they do is they ask a few questions and then they go quiet for a while and then we get the letter approving it. So and then now it's been about 3 weeks that I haven't heard anything. So I think probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, and it was a pretty extensive test period, if you will. So I don't expect there'll be too many issues with getting it approved permanently.
Yeah, and the whole time we were sending in data we did a lot of extra testing for the past year. We sent in reports initially every 2 weeks and then about once every month and then once every 2 months. And it was running perfectly in alum the whole time. We never had any issues of any kind. One of the concerns the state had was would the partners start building up disinfectant byproducts in the distribution system? And that takes a few months to show up. It's related to how old the water is in the pipelines in cities. And the partners never had an increase in it either. So it's should be very non-controversial for them. The alum is very common. It's more common than ferric is in our area to use. So we're not expecting any issues with it.
Thank you.
Having approval for both gives us a lot of flexibility. So we were on ferric until it became not available due to manufacturing problems. It came back on the market about 6 months ago, but at 4 times the previous cost. Wow. So we are staying on alum because it's cheaper at the moment. And so having approval to do either gives us more flexibility, both in case of some future supply disruption or pricing. We'll be able to choose either one.
Yep.
Tim, I am concerned about 2 transformer failures this early in the life of this facility. I mean, you have to wonder if there's a latent defect in the design or the engineering of the facility. I just want to register my concern about that. I really would like to get to the bottom of it. When we see wires arcing, I mean, that's really bad.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of my first thought is there some sort of a latent defect in the sheathing of the wires, like a manufacturing problem or potentially a design problem? And one thought that I hadn't really talked to Stan yet about it, was do we want to bring in a third party to come in and kind of look at some of this stuff? So we'll talk about that. They're actually bringing in they actually brought in an outside third party to do some of the testing we've already started. We've already started doing some testing. And we'll continue to do more over the next couple, 3 weeks to try to prove out exactly what happened. That's why we're doing a deep dive now, is what exactly happened and why. Because
this is a design, build, operate project. I mean, we really can't trust our contractor necessarily. They have self-interest here. So I think the idea of a third party having a look would be a really good idea. Now, California has a 10-year latent defect law. That's for, I don't know if that's strictly residential, that applies to everything, every contract. Rich might have a better idea of that. So I just want to make sure we protect our legal rights because there may be a very costly repair necessary here.
Yes. Yeah, it could be one other factor that we're running to ground is we see voltage fluctuations on the incoming power.
Hmm.
And that's also very hard on the electrical system. And
You
so
know,
we
I
need to
acknowledge that. I acknowledge that, but you know, it seems to me the system has to be designed to handle some power fluctuation, wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, we're pursuing all options. The first time is okay, deal with it, and the second time, well, now we know we're really investigating it. We're going through the entire plant. We're actually going to shut the plant down for 2 days in a couple weeks to be able to check all the wiring and the primary power and the primary power feeds into the plant. Yeah, we're doing a very deep dive.
And I think everything you do should get memorialized in writing.
It will.
It will.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're going a lot deeper this time. You know, a one-off, you can assume there was an issue there, but when you have a second issue, which is primarily a repeat of the first one, then it really begs the question, what's going on? So and to the extent that we're going to shut the plant down for a few days to be able to get into and do some of these inspections, and then having that information reviewed by a third party is absolutely critical to ensure that our interests are protected.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Tim or for Stan? All right, thank you for that update, appreciate it. Look forward to hearing back from you on this and getting getting some more information on it, so thank you. All right, so moving along, item number 7, consider adoption of resolution 2022-02, approving amended and restated agency conflict of interest code. Is that back to you, Tim?
Josh, would you mind handling this one?
Well, I'm trying to pull up the,
Or Josh Horowitz, I mean, sorry.
yeah, I'm like, I'm trying to pull that piece up. I'm like, I don't even want me handling this.
Just had to unmute. So every 2 years, the Political Reform Act requires every public entity, local public entity, to review their conflict of interest code and determine whether any updates are necessary or not. And if so, to approve an updated conflict of interest code and to submit it to the County Board of Supervisors, which is deemed to be the code reviewing body, for approval. And once the Board of Supervisors provides that approval, the updated code becomes the agency code for the following 2 years. I have to admit, this was something that Dick Shanahan worked on before he left on vacation, so I'm not real familiar with exactly what the updates were that Dick made to this. But I am trusting that he suggested and wrote into this updated code the appropriate updates. So, you know, this is pretty much a housekeeping item, and the board's being asked today just to enact this resolution in order to allow the updated code to go to the Yolo County Board of Supervisors for approval so that the code can take effect on January 1st.
I look at this as a render unto Caesar kind of task. So I will second anyone else's motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the item.
All right, moved by Arnold, second by Stollard. Is there any more comments? No, all right.
Chairman Chapman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard,
Aye.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Landsberg.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Motion approved unanimously. Moving on to item number 8.
Yeah, so this is an item that I think we talked about first at our last board meeting. Back in 2020, the agency approved the base contract with WAPA for providing electric power to the water treatment plant beginning in 2025. We met with WAPA a few months ago, and the final contracts are now ready for consideration. 2 additional contracts. One is custom power product or custom product power, and the other one is full load power service, full load service power. And basically, the way WAPA works is that they have essentially multiple layers of power supply. Base load is roughly 25% of our usage, and then they have custom and exchange and full load. Well, full load is really I think the scheduling person. Basically to get us 100% power supply through WAPA. They are primarily hydroelectric power plants that the federal government owns in the Western United States. So there's a base load guaranteed power supply. And then exchange is if somebody is not using their full base load, they can transfer to somebody else. Custom product could be their hydropower, it could be somebody else's, or it could be market purchase. And then we also need the scheduling person. They actually schedule power every minute of every day. So either we would need to do that ourselves and submit how much power we need, or let them do it for us like they do with everybody else. It seems to make a lot of sense that they do it, because also a person needs to be very much in the know on how to do that kind of stuff and certified, I think, to do it. Overall, we looked at cost. It's a bit hard to look at it on a month-by-month basis because of the way that WAPA is structured. There's a very low base cost. Each of the different additional layers have a different cost that changes a bit throughout the year, and then they have some back charging that comes in sometimes a few months later. So what we did is we looked at 2 whole years of data, and what we found was that basically using PG&E power on a whole year basis, it's about 15.5 cents per kilowatt hour. WAPA electric usage on that same time period, the same power usage, was about 9.5. So essentially a 40% reduction in electricity cost for that 2-year period. In terms of dollars, it's about $300,000 a year difference in power cost. So our recommendation is to adopt these agreements, which would switch the agency to full WAPA power at the water treatment plant beginning in 2025. The intake on the Sacramento River has always been on WAPA power. That has been on WAPA power since before it was even an agency facility. So we're happy with that. We're used to paying WAPA power bills. We had a bit of a scare earlier this summer when one of the charges really went up. We talked with WAPA and we said, hey, why did this happen? And they corrected it and gave us credit very quickly. So they're actually pretty good to work with. With that, I can take any questions on it.
Why do we wait till 2025?
That's what WAPA, that's WAPA's new contract timeframe. We had actually applied for this in 2017 for power starting in 2025. So we applied in 2017. In 2020, they replied that we're in, and going through contracts now to start supply in 2025. It's a 30-year contract, so it's 2025 through 2054.
Thank you. It just sounds like a win-win to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Is
I
that a
think
motion, Mr. Landsberg?
Sure, it's a motion. Sounds like a motion. I'll second it.
All right. Motion by Landsberg, second by Arnold. Roll, please.
We'll change it up. Director Landsberg,
Aye.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stellard,
Aye.
Chairman Chapman.
Aye. All right, motion passes. All right, moving along. Item number 9.
Yeah, this is something we touched on last meeting as well. And I talked earlier that I think that the term 91 curtailment will continue past the end of October, at which the agency does not have the ability to take water from the Sacramento River. We've been working through multiple options to try to find a contract with somebody to provide water for us through this winter. And also when we did the contract with South Sutter earlier this year, we included in that an option for a fall winter transfer. So we looked at what options do we have. There's not a whole lot this year. I mentioned earlier that City of West Sacramento is not available. Other usual suspects are generally not available. There was another water transfer that we are aware of that happened around the same time. Winter Water, they paid $900 an acre foot for their water, and there's some others in this neighborhood. This is a bit more of an expensive water supply cost in winter than we're accustomed to. It's $550 an acre foot. We paid less in the past. It is a bit less than what we paid in the summer, but that's what was negotiated with them. It does include a $100,000 upfront payment, and that's to reserve a full 2,000 acre feet of water. That $100,000 is counted towards the first water that we use. So it ends up being about the first, I don't know, 10 days or so of water. We would burn through that. I think this is really our best option this year, as opposed to turning the water plant off. If we were to turn the water plant off, we have some, and as we discussed before, we have some serious issues with restarting the plant. The plant does run on biology. If that biology does die off, then it would take a few weeks to reestablish. We have 25 miles of pipelines that the agency owns, which would become stagnant water, and we have no good way to flush that water out if it sits for too long. So it's kind of imperative for the agency to not actually turn the water plant off for any real amount of time. We would operate the plant at basically the minimum capacity. Sutter would release water to us that we would take out at around 6.7 or so million gallons per day, each 6.7 to 7 million gallons per day, depending on exactly how the percentages work out, which provides about 3.5 million acre feet to each of the parts. So Woodland-Davis, and then UC Davis would take off of Davis's water. That's basically about the minimum the plant can operate at. We would do that basically just to keep the water plant alive and functional, and to stretch that water out as long as possible. You may recall that a few years ago, this curtailment going into winter, well, I think will continue until there's a good sized rainstorm coming. It could happen by November 15th. It might not happen until January. A few years ago, we were in the same situation where it did not rain until Christmas. And we got pretty nervous that we were about to actually run out of the 2,000 acre feet we had. So we're going to use it at minimum flow rate to stretch it out as long as possible and minimize our expenses. Hopefully the curtailment ends, and we will only be using this water during millennium curtailment. As soon as curtailment ends, we will stop using this water and go back to our primary water rate. So kind of talk through several things relatively quickly. Can take any questions.
All right. Any questions for Tim? All right. All right, seeing none, if we can get a motion to approve it.
So moved, Arnold.
Second, Landsberg.
All right, motion by Arnold, second by Landsberg. We can get a roll call, please.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard,
Aye.
Director Landsberg,
Aye.
Chairman Chapman.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I was just remembering, do we need to be doing public comment on each of these?
I believe the
Technically,
clerk
yes,
will-
but there's-
Well, to be fair, there hasn't been any public comment received here on anything for any time.
Just wanted to make sure.
Technically, yes, if there was public present, yes.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure. My
And don't
first
we-
meeting running here with this group, so I just want to make sure I was crossing my T's and dotting my I's.
Don't-
Sorry?
I was just gonna say, don't we usually with each item though, offer a chance for board member discussion and comment before we fly into the vote? We usually have a formal does anybody have anything they want to say?
Sure, yeah, just seemed like people weren't asking questions, so I can be more aware of
Well-
asking that question.
Maybe we've moved to a really informal model, but in the past we've been a little bit more formal. And so we've kind of held questions generally until we get to the question place. And today we've just moved straight from presentation to vote. And
Refreshing,
for
isn't
those of
it?
us who are not voting, it definitely doesn't give us much chance to share observations.
Okay, thank you. Item number 10.
Oh, never mind. Sorry, I thought I had a point of order, but I didn't.
Okay, then the next item is adopt a resolution to basically waive public public contract code requirements and bidding contracts. This is related to repairing the finished water pipeline to the city of Davis and UC Davis. I think you may recall a few months ago now, a contractor decided to horizontally directionally drill right through the finished water transmission main. That knocked out water supply to Davis and UC Davis for some time. There was a contractor that was working in Davis at the time, McGuire and Hester. They were called and came over and did an emergency repair. So we have basically a patch on the pipe that's been functional for a few months now. That patch does not have cathodic protection. We never really repaired the road properly. The focus at that time was to get the pipe back in service as quickly as possible, patch up the road good enough, and then work on a permanent repair. We're now at the point that we're working on the permanent repair. However, because it is a repair, we have to basically plan everything out in advance. We cannot tolerate a long-term shutdown of the water supply to Davis and UC Davis. So we've been working with the contractor basically to buy everything we need ahead of time, get everything in place, do a short duration shutdown, get the pipeline back in operation as quickly as possible, and then finish the road paving. So we've been working with McGuire and Hester for that. They're a good contractor. Both City of Davis and City of Woodland have experience working with them. They've been doing good work. They did the emergency repair, so they're very familiar with the project and the work that's required. Basically, we're going to drop in a new section of pipe with an access manway, so that way we can do cathodic protection coating on the pipe. So it'll be a 50-year plus repair is what we're looking for, not what we have right now. But because of the nature of this, we don't have really the ability to competitively bid, then procure materials, and then actually do the construction. Just because basically we are repairing damage essentially. So public contract code allows for waiver of public bidding rules in a situation such as this, but it does require board action to allow us to move forward to contracting and construction. So I can take any, Stan and I can take any questions you have on it. Stan's, I think, a bit more familiar with it than I am.
You have to pay prevailing wage.
Yes. All this really does is that it allows us to construct the project and shorten the duration of shutdown of the pipeline. There's not really a way to properly design a repair like this without a contractor doing it for us, essentially.
I would respectfully move the recommended action, but I'd love a definition of cathodic.
Yeah, that is, so the pipeline is a welded steel pipeline, and cathodic protection is basically stopping the electrons from the welded steel pipe from going into the ground. When that happens, that's basically what we see as rust, right? The electrons leave the pipe, go into the ground, and then it basically degrades the steel over time, and then you get a hole in the pipe. Cathodic protection system is a number of ways we do it. Basically coating the pipe. Typically we use cement mortar lining inside the pipe. This pipe has a tape wrapped exterior. Some of the pipes have a epoxy coating exterior, and we also run an active electric current on the pipe to keep the electrons where they're supposed to be.
Thank you.
Multiple layers of protection.
So my motion.
Tom, you had to ask that question, exposing that us lawyers know nothing about chemistry.
I just realized we don't have chat because I was about to drop a link to the Wikipedia article on cathodic protection.
There you go.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor by Stallard. Do we have a second?
I'll second Arnold.
All right, second by Arnold. Any other questions, comments, anything else? For
I might have missed the part about how this happened.
Yeah, so there was in essence, a contractor was boring for a fiber install, and they bored into the line as it was on 103, County Road 103, just by Road 27. So they bored into it. So we're having some discussions around that. Certainly that there was, with the locate mark challenge, there were some challenges there. But they knew the line was there. They bored into it. So we're having some discussions on that front with legal. part of it is we needed to understand what the total cost of the repair was as well. So, but that's in a nutshell, that's what occurred to cause the damage. I actually have the piece of pipe in my office right here with the hole in it. So
Must have been a
Is
big
that a
mess.
threat? Sorry.
So we expect their liability coverage to take
So
care of the costs.
we definitely are exploring that. Like I said, there were some mitigating factors with the locate and mark that we had online, but they knew the pipe was there. They were told the pipe was there on a couple different occasions. So with legal, we do think we have a pretty good case to go back and recoup some of these costs. Yeah. Mhm.
All right, thank you for that information. Any other questions, comments before we move on to a vote? All right, seeing none, hearing none, can you please call roll?
Chairman Chapman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stallard,
Aye.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Landsberg.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys, everyone. Item 11, long range board calendar.
And our next regularly scheduled meeting, I gotta go find it. Where are we? January
19th.
19th.
Does this mean that this is Will Arnold's last meeting?
Nope.
No, I'm still on the council.
Oh, good. You got 2 more years?
Yeah.
And then, thank you, Will.
Yeah, I'm avoiding this election season, thankfully. Josh and I were both elected / reelected in 2020, so we've got 2 more years.
That's reassuring. Thank you so much.
We may get Lucas as a county supervisor rep at some point on this body, and then we would really have quite the team.
It'll be a 3-2. Thank you.
So the next meeting is January 19th. It is on the calendar as in Woodland, but subject to whatever you guys want to do. Zoom, whatever you want to do.
If I may,
Yes.
it appears at this moment that your January meeting would probably be the last meeting you can hold wholly by remote under AB 361. I'm sure some of you have read that the governor has announced,
Yes.
I guess he has a great crystal ball, but he is lifting the COVID emergency on February 28th of 2023. And when that happens, we'll be going back either to the old school Brown Act teleconference rules. And there is also a bill that just passed the legislature in this session that will take effect on January 1st, AB 2449, that will allow directors under certain circumstances to meet remotely without having to go through all the posting and agenda listing requirements of the existing Brown Act teleconference rules. And we'll be sending an update around in December that explains how that would work. But in terms of being able to hold remote meetings, it looks like January will be your last.
Maybe we should celebrate by staying in Zoom for one last meeting.
So is your I may have this backwards or something. So the Assembly Bill 361, it has a sunset date, but that's just the bill's sunset date. But it requires that the state of emergency exist in order for us to suspend the Brown Act or modify the Brown Act to do these teleconference meetings. That once the emergency is gone, then the ability to do teleconference public meetings goes with it.
That's correct, Director
Okay.
Arnold.
Unless there's an urgency action.
The
by the way.
new emergency. Well, let's get working on that.
This is not entirely pertinent, but I am just curious. Is there conversation happening around ideas that this actually extends public access, being able to meet online. Is there any legislation that's burbling around that would actually indefinitely extend online meeting? I'm just curious because I've heard two different stories. Some people are like, this is great. I'm finally able to
Yeah.
make a public meeting because my kids can sit in the back, or whatever. And then other people who are like, oh my God, we can't end this soon enough. So I'm just curious.
Probably a good question for us to ask of Cecilia.
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
he chairs the Assembly Local Government Committee, and I suspect something like this would go through that committee.
Okay. If I can remember, I'll shoot her an email, just as a curiosity point.
And if you would, perhaps you could send it to Stan or to Tim to circulate to all of us.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I can shed a little immediate light on this.
Oh,
Thanks.
Unfortunately, AB 2449, which did pass in this session, we all thought that would be the vehicle to provide for some kind of permanent ability to meet remotely. And be mindful that this really is all about the Brown Act and the board itself being able to meet remotely. Many agencies already, even though they're meeting in person again, are providing a remote platform as a permanent addition. There's nothing that prevents, for example, your consultants and any member of the public from participating remotely at any meeting. The Brown Act rules are only limitations on the board itself. So there's nothing that prevents this board, if you so choose, to continue to offer a remote platform for public participation, or, if you don't want to pay your lawyer to drive to Davis or Woodland, you can save
Right.
money by having us zoom in as well and avoid some expense. Lots of clients are very happy not to pay us to drive. So we're already seeing, our role change a little bit. And as you said, Member Kirk, the public loves this.
Yeah.
And a lot of agencies are just doing this as an accommodation on a go forward basis to try to maximize participation.
I don't
Thanks
know
for
if
that
you,
clarification. That's helpful.
if you noticed, Camille, yesterday, the Los Angeles City Council met by Zoom from within their chambers, left the doors locked to keep the thousands of protesters over the recent incident outside. So that's not a good example for maintaining this kind of accommodation to those of us who sit on these boards.
Yep. That's not the right kind of public access. Yeah. I agree.
One member, in fact, refused to attend the meeting for that very reason, stated it publicly.
Okay, so no other items for long range? Anything
No,
else?
that's it.
All right, so we'll move to item 12. Any board member comments?
Sorry, I preemptively went there.
No worries at all. All
Just
right,
thank you to our staff. You guys are doing a great job. I mean, you keep
absolutely.
zigging and zagging with all of the vicissitudes of these different restrictions, and we continue to get water coming out our taps. Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, thank you. Wish we had a more uplifting update today.
Hey, WAPA is good news though. That's great.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
1 out of 10,
Saving
Camille.
and-
1 out of 10. Absolutely.
And I might ask,
okay, well,
All right,
do we have another transformer spare on the shelf?
We did have a spare, so we're using the spare right now.
It's always nerve-wracking though when there's not a spare to succeed the spare,
Yes,
especially when we have a recurring
Right.
problem.
it's on the ozone system, and we do have the ability to use chlorine instead of ozone.
Mhm.
So and we do also have the ability to bring in a generator if we needed to.
Yeah, so there are contingencies, yes.
Thank you.
all right. Any other comments? Okay. Moving along, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
I didn't catch who was. I don't know if it was-
Rich first and I second.
All right, moved by Landsberg, second by Arnold. Any further questions, comments? All right, seeing none, we can get a roll.
Roll call vote. Chairman Chapman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Stellard,
Aye.
Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Landsberg.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Happy Halloween.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Okay.
Good, may all of you too.